Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Vic Gatto. This is the HealthStorm Live, and excited to have Karen Thomas here with us today. She's the CEO and founder of Agrin. Karen, really thanks for doing this. I think it's a great, exciting event.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
People are just coming in right now, and as usual, and I think most people know, HealthStorm, we're talking about change coming to healthcare, all the moving parts. This is our live event that we have a live audience. Karen and I will talk through this topic, which is really interesting topic of health data, getting control of your own data. Who else can see your data? There's been lots of policy changes over the last couple of years. CMS and ONC both have released new initiatives. And I think there's lots of topics around this to talk about. It's important to drive innovation, to have transparency to what our data is. Everyone has seen different hospitals, different doctors, and so you end up having data in all different silos. Pulling that together so you have one source of truth is really valuable. But of course, it also creates a target for maybe bad actors to do things that aren't ideal. So we need security in there too, and privacy. So that's the topic for today. Health data, gathering your health data. How can we leverage that to improve the healthcare system for ourselves, for our family, and hopefully for the overall system? Karen is really an expert at that. Before we dive into that, I want to just give some quick housekeeping things. So we will go through probably 20 minutes. I end up always droning on a little bit long. So 20 to 30 minutes of sort of the general discussion. And then there'll be certainly time at the end for questions. There's not an ability for you to speak questions. So please use either of the chat feature down at the bottom of your screen or the Q&A feature. And you can type in the questions. I'll try to monitor that. And if we can get over and touch on a question as part of the discussion, we will. And then at the end, we'll come back and make sure we got to everything. So with that, Karen, maybe just give a little background of yourself before we dive into the topic.
Yeah, of course. So my undergraduate's actually in neuroscience, pre-med. I've studied at Harvard and Vanderbilt, but my mom got sick. And so I needed to get a job to support her and my brother, and I wasn't qualified to do anything but go to medical school. So a payer actually took me in. I started out as in data entry and ended up running the behavioral provider network for TennCare for a lot of years under Magellan. And then went from there, jumped the fence, went over to the provider side, ran around the country working for Ross Perot Sr. when Pro Systems purchased ARS, Advanced Receivable Strategies. And so got to work with over a dozen hospitals from Boston to Honolulu, seeing all different ways of doing things, working on all different systems, different payer mixes, different patient mixes. It was really a fantastic experience. And then from there, actually went over to the vendor space. And when CHS purchased Triad, they're the little fish buying the big fish and got themselves into a situation where they had tons of systems they had to integrate. And so they hired a company called MediFinance, now MediAnalytics, out of San Fran, who in turn hired me to come in as the national representative and help them clean all that up. So I wrote the analytics to get the algorithms to get all of their AR out of the disparate systems post month end, and then to look at their operations across there became 6 divisions. From there, went over to what was then Endion, and took over the product strategy for the provider side, so claims and remittances, and went through the Blackstone acquisition, and got to a point where they decided that they didn't need product management anymore and eliminated my department. I was leadership, so I had a non-compete, and so I had some time to think about what I wanted to do next, and was able to do some consulting while I was figuring it out. And I got to thinking about something. I'd just become a parent, and was sitting, it's middle of the night, had a sheet of paper in my lap with a line drawn down the center, trying to keep up with my meds, post-operative meds, because I had a C-section, and then my son's thriving metrics, his outputs and stuff, and yeah, I'm a numbers girl, right?
Yeah, right.
But I was so tired, I could not do the math to figure out when I was supposed to take my next med. And I remember thinking, like, this was insanely hard. And I knew we had it as easy as it gets. And so I was thankful for that. But I thought about it and thought, what are people doing? Because most people don't have it as easy as it gets. Most people, are single
most people
parents.
don't have the science background. They don't understand how you were at providers, big health systems, on the data integration side, and then in the kind of processing side of things and a tech background, you had all the different perspectives, and yet it's still very hard to keep up with.
It was,
if not impossible. I'd say
if not impossible. That's right. And so when I looked around, I realized there were 7 different apps I was going to have to put on my phone to cover what I was covering in my one sheet of paper. And this was 2012. I thought, my sheet of paper is still a better tool for me than all the technology I can put my hands on. This is ridiculous. And so that's when I started making phone calls and so I called Blue Cross Blue Shield, I called LifePoint, called HCA, called CA, and said, guys, like, people can't manage at home.
Yeah,
Who is helping them?
You're not calling customer service. You're calling your contacts there, your friends
right.
there.
That's right. Yeah, I'm calling the leadership guy. Who's working on this because I want to help.
Right.
And this was back when
the answer was nobody.
That's right. You had high tech. You had ACA. You had ICD-10 coming down. Everybody's like, Karen, like, we're barely keeping it together. The last thing I'm thinking about is tools for patients at home. And even if I do something like that, like, I'm gonna create it so that it keeps them with me and not going to, down the street to my competitor. And I was like, oh, of course you're not. Like, that's your job is to make sure your organization survives and thrives. And when that mission comes into conflict with what the patient needs at home, so be it. And that's really how Agrin Health got started. Was we need help at home. Somebody needs to be in our corner, putting it all together, helping us put it together, helping us figure out what we're supposed to do. And that was really kind of my foray into what we now are focused on around data aggregation and turning it into intelligence.
Yeah. So in 2014, is that right? So six and a half years ago, you launched Agrin. And what was the vision then, and what has it grown to now?
Yeah. So the initial vision has always been a 10-year play. Like, the initial vision's always been to get to what I call consumer decision support. I want an intelligence that helps me figure out what am I supposed to be doing for myself and my family day in and day out. But that's a moonshot, certainly back in 2014. And so we step back from there and say, okay, well, where do we need to start? Well, we have to start with just getting the data, because we can't help people make decisions based on it if we don't even have it to begin with. So the very, very early days of Agrin were really focused on just going and collecting the data, the medical record data, the ambient data. Now we talk about social determinant of health data.
So you're pointing out of the different EMRs, the different records where it's being held, and there's different standards. Even if they're all on HL7 or all on FHIR, it still needs normalization and kind of cleaning up. And
it does. And honestly, that's actually been a secondary issue for us. The primary issue for us has just been the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Literally not being allowed access. So even with the initial laws, it said, well, patients are allowed to get access to their information. We would pick up the phone and say, oh, so-and-so wants us to get their information for them. And the response would be, well, you're not an approved vendor. We don't know, we're not giving you their data because we don't trust anybody but these 3 companies, or you have to go through our EHR. And the EHR said, we don't do that.
Right. That was true for several years of Agrin. But then there's been recent changes in the legislation that have opened that up dramatically. Right? Yeah,
that's exactly right. So the big push, right? So you had the 20. It's really kind of started snowballing in 2016 when the 21st Century Cures Act first came out, which kind of laid the groundwork. Now, that initial legislation was actually designed to expedite getting pharmaceuticals to market, freeing up the data so pharmacies could finish the research and get to market. But it set the precedent against information blocking. And so then in 2018, you see the MyHealthy data come out that says, no, it's not just in the industry. We also need to give individuals access to their care, building on HIPAA as well.
That was MyHealthEData.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to get it right, but you had to offer the data in open, standard, what they call machine readable formats, really APIs, I think. Is that close to right?
So MyHealthEData is actually a policy directive that was directing HHS and all, everything that falls underneath that. So ONC and CMS particularly to go run this. So in the meantime, in parallel to that policy, you have additional legislation. And so the legislation is really what has set the standard for what players and stakeholders specifically can and can't do around freeing up the data, making it accessible. And then just this past year in 2020, we've had a ton of legislation come through, a revision to what it's now called the ONC Cures Act. Which was originally going to go into effect in November, got pushed to April of this year because of COVID. But that's what sets the standard around the data exchange. And then you've got two policies that came out, two proposals in December. One around the final rule for the OMB stuff, and then the other one around modifying HIPAA. The OMB one's finalized, the HIPAA one's still in proposal, but will probably go through. And with that, what all of that does together is it really expands a number of avenues in terms of, it sets the standard for, it requires that providers have an API, and it sets the standard for it. And it also lists the specific exceptions for not getting in trouble for information blocking.
Yeah.
And then it also goes into some
the blockers, maybe Epic has been my most frustrating blocker. They no longer can sort of stand in the way. Epic, Cerner, anyone who wants to keep it in their kind of footprint, they no longer can as of April. Is that right? That's
what's intended.
Yeah.
The devil's always in the details, right? So the exception still exists that you're not information blocking if you withhold the information because you're concerned about patient harm. You're not information blocking if you interfere on basis of security. So even though a provider will need to have an API that meets these standards by April to check that box, they can certainly go through the process of saying, well, in order for us to make sure that we only transfer the data securely, you have to go through our vendor approval process to tie into that API. So I can still call my provider and say, under this law, I want you to send my information to my personal health record over here. They are not information blocking by the purest definition of the law. If they come back to me and they say, well, the PHR that you told us you want us to send it to isn't approved. We are concerned for your data security and we don't want to send it to them. But here's our other options. So there's gonna end up being a lot of workarounds that are going to have to go on in order to, you're not going to magically see a bunch of aggregated data in May.
Yeah. But there are penalties. I mean, are there penalties if they refuse to offer that?
There's $1 million penalty if you're found guilty of information blocking. Now, the process of accusing someone of information blocking and proving it and them being found guilty of it, outside of these exceptions.
Yeah.
Maybe a class action lawsuit, but otherwise it's going to be difficult.
So for Agrin, you're in the middle of this. Have you seen health systems and other providers or their EHR or data repositories begin opening up? Or are they
I mean, you see things like Open Epic, right?
Yeah.
ironically, the legislation specifically states that part of its purpose is to ease the burden on providers in terms of getting people the information they need. And so by building this API, but what it doesn't talk about is great. So now you've got, potentially 100,000 apps on the App Store, all calling you saying, I need into this API. That's going to be a monumental onslaught for them. And so it'll be really interesting to see, how the providers respond, if it's going to be a, get in line for our process kind of deal, or if it's going to be more of a open API and, consumer beware. And it still doesn't change that the burden is still on, us in the innovation community to now go to the provider, right? So now we've got thousands of providers we have to go hook into each and every one of their APIs if we're going to serve a broad community.
Right. Yeah. So let's go back to Agrin. So 6 years ago, 7 years ago, your plan, well, maybe a little before that, you were sort of mapping out this problem, and then you launched Agrin. I think it's really interesting in the manner and style you're building the company, right? So I think you are building really for kind of a long game, is what I'd call it. Like, you didn't go raise $20 million and say in 2014, we're off. It's been more of a slow burn. Like, we're going to build this for 10 years or 20 years. Mm-hmm. Talk about kind of your approach to that and how you've paid the bills during the time, and, is now the time, or is it not quite yet? When is it going to really turn on?
Yeah, so some of it was kind of a dumb luck thing, because we did originally plan to go raise several $1 million and get started right out of the gate, and being a first-time entrepreneur, and honestly being a little bit early for the investor community in terms of our vision, right? Because back in 2013 we were socializing the concept, and then 2014 we were looking to get it to grow. People weren't talking about social determinants of health. People weren't talking about consumer-driven healthcare, and so that kind of concept was, I think,
I don't think those consumer-driven existed, but social determinants of health was not a thing then.
No, yeah. That was the funny thing. So, consumers don't have any money. That's not the and so that just wasn't really palatable. And so we fell back and said, okay, like, what's the other plan? And so you're exactly right. At that point, I said, all right, I'm just going to bootstrap this thing. We're going to make this work, and we're going to figure it out. And so for the first couple of years, we did just kind of make our way through to figure out like how all this was going to fit. Where were the blockades? Who did we need in our corner to get this going? And then we just took a little bit more speed,
One of the things that I believe, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll ask it. I think you built Agrin for a time when there was sort of open APIs and all this data was available.
Yeah.
And then kind of like moved back from that assumption. What would we need? How do we build bridges to that?
Oh, you're exactly right. So thank you for bringing that. Yeah. The goal right out of the gate, right, was a moonshot, was, hey, people need help making decisions at home, right? Mm-hmm. And so then how do we get to that? Well, the first step is getting the data. And so you're exactly right. Our major assumption when we launched the company was, and still is, that at some point the data is going to be available, predominantly available. And at that point, the question is going to be, what do you do with it? And so if we can start working on the what do you do with it question now, even without the data, and then trudge through it along with everybody else who doesn't have access to the data, when we do get to a point where we've figured out interoperability and access and who owns the data, right, we'll be in a position to actually do what we need to do.
Yeah, it's almost like you're building this you're building this operation, and the bridge to the mainland isn't built yet, but once it comes, there's going to be all these people coming in that need help. I think about it compared to other markets, right? So if you want to buy a stock or check what your balance in your bank is, or buy something on the internet, buy a physical retail product, the information of price, quality, competitors, what reviews are out there, what else do I have in my portfolio or my bank account? All that is immediately available and accurate and secure. And so the basic building blocks are in place. Healthcare just hasn't adopted it all. And I agree with you. It's coming. I think it's actually accelerating. The reason I wanted to do this Healthstorm Live is I think it's coming in the next 18, 24 months. But you've been working on it and thinking about, okay, what will this mean for a long time?
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'm interested in your thoughts about what tools does someone need? So they get like all of their data. I'm probably in 9 or 10 different health systems. I have data in a bunch of it. I've moved a lot of things. If I got all that brought into Agrin and it was all organized and harmonized, what do I then use it for?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So when people talk about their healthcare data, they're typically talking about medical record data, right? And while that's got some very valuable data points, it's actually a very, very small piece of the data that's actually relevant to you and your health, right? Because it's only the data that's been captured while you're in a clinical setting by clinicians. What's really, really relevant in a bigger capacity is all the things that you do day in and day out, right? What do you eat? Do you exercise? How much do you sleep? How do you handle stress response? What's your genetic makeup? What your genetic propensities? All of those things you're not going to find in a medical record. So while medical records are, a necessary data point, and they're certainly necessary as we are currently responsible for being the secretary for the healthcare industry and being the coordinator of our care team, having that data in order to basically chair and lead the care team is necessary. But
your medical basic stuff's not in place. So if you go to, I don't know, an orthopedic surgeon, say my knee hurts, he might prescribe some medications, and he or she doesn't have any visibility to what other meds I'm on.
Right.
And so there's basic sort of, just not anything fancy, just make sure this med doesn't interfere with something else.
That's right.
But then once you get beyond that, you might need your diet, exercise, genetics, in order to sort of say what's going to happen in the future.
That's right. That's exactly right. So if you bring in way more than just your medical record data, right? So you bring in, you got your Fitbit, let's say you're tracking your food on MyFitnessPal, you've got your favorite meds app, right? If you bring all that together, coupled with, even by itself, medical record, you can start to figure things out like, A, are my meds really working for me? And B, if I skip a dose, what does that really mean? Is it like I can catch it up the next day, or is it a 3-day impact? For my genetic makeup.
Or even what does the doctor recommend I do? Like,
that's right.
Okay, I realize now when I go to bed, I missed the noon dose. What am I supposed to do?
That's right. Yeah. Or to your point, you end up getting knee surgery, right? And you come home with this discharge instructions where your surgeon says, all my patients that have this surgery, I want you to stay off it for 6 days, right? And then you go to your rehab, and your therapist says, oh, well, yeah, I know you've got this really important event coming up that you want to be ready for. Let's accelerate your rehab program. I'm going to have you walking by day 3. Meanwhile, you still have your standing, orders from your physician to do, 30 minutes of cardio, twice a day or twice a week. And so you're getting all these conflicting instructions, and none of your care team knows that you're getting conflicting instructions, right? And today it's on us to pull it all together and then send it back out. And that's daunting for someone if that was even their daily job, let alone, the rest of us where that's not our job.
Yeah. So give me your impression of what this can empower healthcare consumers to get for themselves. How do we get them more satisfied, more healthy? How do we help them save money?
Yeah.
What can they
be better healthcare consumers, right? So knowing what to do for how you want to live, helping your care team help you, right? finding out what actually works for you personally, and getting closer to personalized medicine. All of those things, getting us to a point where we have the information that we need to be good consumers, to know what questions to ask our care team, and to be confident in doing that. Get all the mundane tasks out of the way. Don't bog me down with collecting my data. Don't bog me down with interpreting my data. Just support me in what I need to be doing. For somebody my age and my genetic makeup, I should be doing more of this exercise than that one. That's what I need.
Yeah, and it strikes me that in society in general, certainly in the healthcare industry, we're kind of awash in data and we don't really have any insight.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I want another data point. I do want sort of a dashboard or intelligence that tells me, okay, what should I do this weekend to get a little healthier or to get prepared more?
Yeah, and so where I sit, data is useless in and of itself. It has no value until you turn it into information. And then the information has very limited value until you turn it into actionable intelligence, right? So data is very necessary means to an end, but it's not the goal. So when we look at the legislation that's out there and do you have access and how do you get it and how do we make it easier? That's all very necessary, but it's not the goal. It's a means to an end. Giving people access to their data, it is not the end of things. It doesn't, in and of itself, doesn't help anything.
Yeah, right. So would Agrin then use sort of a different intelligence layer or a way to help me navigate that and almost like give me easier to understand pathways?
Yes, exactly. Much more personalized direction.
Okay. We have a question from the audience. Is there a central resource or a site that could aggregate all the lists of various hospital provider APIs? I held off for a minute because I think there's a chance that's Agrin, right? Or maybe there are other sites. Maybe there's a government site that is.
Yeah. I don't know that there's specifically a list of provider APIs. There's obviously a list of all the licensed providers, right? Because they all have to have MPIs, and you can pull that down. I will warn you, it's tens of thousands of rows and very, very dirty. But it's there if you were trying to like literally go through and say, well, this here's the API for this one. There's the API. You could brute force it.
I've seen that list. That's a 10-year adventure if you try to.
Yeah. So I think the best thing for innovators and for folks trying to help with and to take advantage of this access would be to know who your targets are, and obviously the smaller range, the better. And contact them directly. They may not have the API ready. The compliance date's not till April. So it may not even be there yet. And B, what's their policy? Are they going to, have they said, oh, well, I've worked with my EMR and our API is through our EMR vendor and you have to go through them? Are they going to create an open API and you just need the address and the specs? Or, are they going to have some other kind of policy where, all the vendors are going to have to go through a vendor approved process, and what does that look like?
Yeah.
The tying into an API, that's the easy part, like super, super easy. Yeah.
If I didn't want to do that, can I come to you and get your help with it?
If you were just an app
just like vendor? Are you available to the general population at Agrin?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
So it's not a trick question. Like I could go to Agrin and sign up, and you don't have every API, but you have a bunch of them, right? And you're adding them.
Yeah. You come to us and you say, I want, my record from, Centennial, whatever it is. If we don't already have a link into them,
Centennial is a Nashville-based HCA hospital. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Then we call Centennial and we say, our member, Vic Gatto wants his medical record. What process do we go through to get it? And at that point, it may be going ahead and hooking into the API. It may be a one-off that we transact for you.
Yeah. Okay. And for you in Agrin, the first time you have to work with Centennial or HCA, you're interacting and getting that API set up.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the next customer comes in,
Already
is
there.
it easier or is it already built?
It's so much easier because then it's just a permissions going over the wire. Yeah, it's already done. Yeah.
Right. So over time, Agrin will build up this, I'm going to call it a library of API relationships.
Yes, fair enough.
And then you have, I don't know, there's an asset there. You have this ability to reach out to any HCA facility, and then pretty soon any HCA facility, and then any Ascension facility, and then any LifePoint facility, and then any Tenet facility.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you're in 4,000 of the 5,000 hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the time frame where that's realistic? Like, is that 12 months from now, Agrin will be pretty broad, or 12 years from now?
That is a fantastic question. I don't yet have a sense for how cooperative the hospital systems are going to be with, excuse me, opening the APIs. So I'll give you a range. If on the I wish it rained, and in terms of like everybody's launching open APIs in April, it could be by the summer. On the other end of the range, where hospital systems are using the exclusionary clauses to restrict who has access to their APIs, it could be years.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good political answer. I think that most likely there's going to be a variety. Some health systems will view it as their mission to provide information, and others will be defensive.
Mm-hmm.
But I think over time, it's going to be chipped away, and they're going to have to do it, or patients are going to leave.
I think healthcare in general behaves as scientists, right? Prove it, and then I'll believe it. And even in the administration where they're not clinicians, they still operate like that. And so I think it's still very much let me see that opening up the data doesn't have some kind of catastrophic effects for my patients and for my revenue when I'm still 85% fee for service. And when I see that, then I'll get comfortable and we can go faster.
Yeah, so that leads me to another question I was interested in your thoughts on. So how do you see this open data, particularly if Agrin is helping me understand it, sort of changing the relationship between the doc and the patient, or the insurance company, the payer and the patient?
We're making it so much easier.
Be different, right? Because I'm gonna at least understand my situation more.
When we help people be better healthcare consumers, everybody wins, right? Our lives are easier. We're living healthier, which is great. But then the healthcare industry benefits it as well, right? Because my provider has it easier because I'm a more engaged, more informed patient. So I'm easier to work with, and personality aside. And then, my employer loves it because I'm at work more, I'm more productive when I'm there. And of course, my insurance loves it because I'm less costly, right? I'm consuming fewer services. And when I do, I'm smarter about them. So it's in everyone's best interest for us to get to a point where we're all better healthcare consumers.
So I totally agree about the employer and the payer. It's not as straightforward on the health system, I don't think. Like, if I'm a more informed consumer, might I use less of the services, use less healthcare?
I would say you'll use them more efficiently, right? You'll probably be more likely to go in when you might have stayed home before. Or you might be more apt to have a conversation about the healthcare financials pre-visit, where you're more likely to be able to pay or set up some kind of payment plan and then pay timely on the back end. Yeah, it's just a better relationship is just, it benefits everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense to me, but I'm not sure that's how every hospital administrator would view it.
They
Because it
won't right
might
now.
lead to fewer, it might lead to fewer procedures.
They will need, yeah, like again, the scientific approach. They're going to want to understand, how does this not reduce my volume in a fee-for-service world? That's exactly right. And so when you start talking about these other effects and you put the bigger picture together, you have an easier conversation. And exactly to your point, there are already several health systems that have already put it together. In fact, there's a couple of health systems, they've already got their own internal divisions, assigned to patient experience and social determinants of health, and they're moving forward with it. And so the leaders and the examples are already there. Just if we run into a situation where we've got a health system who still hasn't turned that corner yet, we just hook them up and say, well, look what your peer's doing over here. They're good with it. Let's talk about that.
The unfortunate thing is, I think most administrators will say Dr. Google has been bad. Like where the patient
Right.
brings like a printout of, well, here's what I think I have.
Right.
And the reason it's negative is it eats up a ton of time in clinics, and it leads to fewer procedures and a kind of a pain in the ass patient. But the difference here is that you are curating it for them. Like it's actually their data, and there's more of a process that Agrin can sort of get them educated.
That's right. So the difference would be, if people are Googling, so typically what they're doing is some kind of self-diagnosis process. And so to your point, what they do is they walk in their doctor's office, they go,
symptoms.
That's right. I've diagnosed myself. Can you just please sign here? And the doctor goes, wait. Right. That's not what we do. We don't diagnose. We don't prescribe treatment. What we can do is we can help you figure out, A, what you should be tracking if you're not, and B, trying to help you collect the ambient data around things you might not have thought of that might actually be relevant, and then just packaging it all up. So if the situation that you're in is seeking a diagnosis as opposed to coping with an existing one, you can take all of that information, package it up in a concise format, and go have a conversation with your care team about, these are the things that are going on with me. And your care team can much more quickly go through and say, rule out. Oh, I'm glad I know about this. Right. And so they can get more quickly to, well, now here's the 2 tests we need to do to finalize which of these it might be, and get you to a diagnosis and get you to a treatment faster.
Okay. So let's talk about the care team, because you just threw that out. That leads to a question I was interested in too. Really, for most of healthcare, even today, the care team is like over here, and the patient is what they are working to fix.
That's right. Yeah.
I think we need to move to a process where the patient is like an active member and armed with information and authority as sort of a contributor to the care team. How do we get there? I mean, can Agrin help consumers get there? Do consumers need to be kind of brought up to speed and educated more? How do we approach that?
All of
or do we even
above.
need?
Yeah.
We want to.
So the way that we approach it is, your care team is anyone that has a role in your health and wellness. So if you're going through a divorce, it might be your pastor, right? If you're, having a friendly weight loss challenge with a friend, they're probably, they're in there too. So we don't have a clinical restriction to the term care team. It's literally everybody you surround yourself with who is advising you and helping you with your health and wellness management. And so just like we do in our other lives, right? So we surround ourselves with friends and coaches and mentors that help us in all aspects of our life. And it's the same approach that we should have with our health and wellness. We should see this as our support system that we diligently choose and foster a relationship with and use and interact with wisely. Now,
is it like our is an analogy sort of like our career path? Like we certainly have a job where we are, but we may want to go back to school. We may have mentors or advisors. Sometimes you would hire a coach to help you with that. And that's kind of an evolving cast of characters as you progress through life.
Right.
Could you have a similar experience with your healthcare? Like you have times when you're happy with your health status, and other times where you really want to try to lean in and make it better. And so the care team would fluctuate.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair representation.
Okay. I have a couple more questions, but for the audience, now's the time you can. I did go a little long, but please either chat or contribute questions in the Q&A button. Karen, the thing I want to talk through before we get to the audience questions is what can people look for as a sign that this is accelerating? So like, there's all this really complex regulatory things that are kind of hard to sift through. Is it one of the big EMR vendors opening up broadly, or a big platform hospital system opening up, or how do you view this as how do we know if the pace is accelerating or slowing down?
Well, it definitely is, and I don't know if it would be accelerating like it is if it wasn't for COVID. The sense of urgency around resolving the public health crisis and making sure that our economy is as supported as possible through this is top on everybody's mind across the globe.
We were talking in the prep call about COVID vaccination records, and also whether you had it or not records being really important to be able to be portable and share it, but they have to be authenticated as well. Talk about that as sort of a catalyst for the whole system.
Yeah, so getting through this public health crisis requires not just vaccinations to be developed and deployed, but also the monitoring of it and the monitoring of the evolution. So part of getting businesses reopened and getting back to normal is making sure that people have an understanding of what their health status actually is and having a way to communicate it. So to your point, that typically falls into COVID testing and COVID vaccination records. And so this really, really brings to the forefront the situation where when I go get my vaccination at Walgreens, how do I, besides my little piece of paper that I can easily lose, easily forge, like how do I actually get a verifiable credential that I can then go take to my employer and say, see, I'm meeting your new policy for COVID vaccinations, or to send my child back to school.
We're in Nashville, Music City, although most of our revenue comes from healthcare, but Music City is the brand. If I want to, if I'm Live Nation and I want to start having concerts again, how do I know, okay, Karen and Vic both have received their vaccination and their boost, and they are okay, in a way that is scalable and reasonably accurate?
That's right. That's exactly right. And so that's exactly what there are a number of folks working on right now. You've already seen some folks come out. So, IBM had their digital health wallet out a couple of years ago. So they already had kind of the infrastructure for some of it. But again, they have to get access to the data before they can put it in. Yeah. And then there's the question about verifying if it doesn't come directly from the data source. You've got, Change Healthcare released their vaccine passport December 30th. Now they happen to be sitting on the pipe. So they've reached in and grabbed patient data and put it into this application. I don't understand the legalities of how they're able to grab patient data.
That's where I was going to go. I'm not sure how.
Yeah, that's I guess above my pay grade, but I do know that's the mechanism and they're one of the few companies that are in a position to be able to have access to so many data sources. So from that standpoint, they are, the legality aside, they are well positioned to help.
They may be soon part of Optum, which will be even a bigger.
Yes. Right, even bigger. That's right. Yeah, and it's interesting. You know, they're not a consumer play. They're strictly a B2B model. So the fact that they're part of the VCI, the Verifiable Credential Initiative, with a number of players. You know, we're keeping up with that because we're a partner. But Cerner's in there. Epic, a lot of the big players. So that's got, from a U.S. perspective, that's got a lot of potential for helping us figure out very quickly what are the terms we're all going to agree to.
Right. Well, what I'm interested in is like similar to telehealth, right? Like there's an impetus to figure this out to solve the COVID public health issue. And that can motivate governments and companies and individuals to say, okay, we need this.
That's
right.
And
then once the cat's out of the bag and it's going and really working, I think there's the entrepreneur in me feels like there's an opportunity to say, well, once we have this all set up,
that's right.
Let's run other things on it.
That's right. You're exactly right. So telemedicine, and are there telehealth services now getting my COVID vaccine data or testing data through these, very, very, pinpoint focused apps? That all gives us possible. And so as soon as we have that, we go, wait a minute. Now, you told us healthcare was hard. You told us convenience wasn't possible, right? Like, this is what you've taught us, that we have to wait 2 hours for the doctor and be thankful for it, that we can't have access to our data because it's too hard. But clearly we can. So now what's the holdup, right? And so at that point, some of the barriers are going to have to come down, just because the public's just not going to tolerate the stories anymore.
The infrastructure is already in place. You just have to repurpose it slightly for another use. So
it's also accelerating a number of other conversations that are going on around privacy, right? Because in this context of how do we verify a credential, a health status credential, and then share it securely, identity comes into that, right? And secure identity has been an issue that's been gaining a lot of momentum and a lot of traction for a few years now. And so all of that, the cybersecurity aspect to it, all of that is now come front and center, all wrapped up in this COVID solution. So I think not just in healthcare, but in information technology across the board, you're going to see some major leaps forward in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah. Okay, we had a question come in talking about Haven. Of course, Haven was the 3-part joint venture of Amazon, Berkshire, JP Morgan, that came out with a big bang 2 or 3 years ago. They were going to sort of disrupt everything and fix it all. And then
I was cheering for them.
Yeah, right. And they hired a famous guy to lead it. Who maybe wasn't that much of an operator, but lot of big egos and big money behind Haven. And then it shut down over the holidays, and they let everyone off, and it just didn't work. And so the question is, can we learn anything from, that failure? And does it mean that healthcare is unassailable, or does it mean something different?
Yeah. Just from my take on it, granted, I was not in the inner workings of it. I don't know the particular details, but just, sitting in the bleacher seats.
You don't strategize with Bezos about what to do?
Well, not in a couple months.
Yeah, right.
So, from the bleacher seats, what I was super excited about, because I thought finally we've got, folks who they've got the capital, they've got the motivation to do something different. And what I saw when they came out with their plan was nothing different. It was the same old thing, just bigger and heavier. And I thought, we blew it. We blew our chance. Here is our chance to really do something different. And we're doing the same thing, expecting different results. It's going to fail. So it still disappointed me, but didn't surprise me when they finally wrapped it up. And I don't know to what extent Amazon's larger healthcare plans might have, gotten crossways with it. But that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I wasn't surprised because I don't think a three-way joint venture with, kind of three masters, all, with significant strength, but different cultures. I mean, Berkshire is powerful, but it's a very different culture than JP Morgan, which also is powerful, and Amazon is yet different again. And I just didn't think it was the right combination. I think any of the three of them individually are stronger than coming together. And I guess somehow it made sense to put them together. And then probably in the first 90 days, I started hearing from bankers at JP Morgan saying, we're doing healthcare deals. We don't want to disrupt stuff. So it was fraying. The partnership was fraying like from the beginning. Okay. And so I take it as sort of a lesson that, innovation by committee almost never works. And so that's something that we say around here at Jumpstart a lot. And, there's a lot of challenges in any kind of change happening. And a committee is destined to not survive through that. So I don't think it means healthcare is unassailable. I think it means we need someone like Karen Thomas to sort of really sort of take it by the horns and solve all the problems. So.
I'm on board. We're working on it.
Yeah. Okay. Just in closing, what's the most exciting healthcare trend you see coming in the next 6 to 9 months, and what's the scariest healthcare trend?
The most exciting for me is I think for a lot of people, this will be the first time everybody's going to be super focused on healthcare in terms of not the insurance side of things, not the payment side of things, but actual like taking care of themselves. And what does healthcare mean, and what does health management mean? It's hard to get stuff moving when people aren't paying attention to it. They have other priorities. And I think this is the right time, right place where everybody's going to be super incentivized to figure it out. So as all these new innovations are coming out, people are going to be trying them, going to be jumping in. And I think the whole thing is going to snowball to this, really, really exciting combination of innovation and consumer engagement to get us to a place where we need to be for healthcare to be sustainable. But you're right. For every light side, there's a dark side. And so the flip side of that is it's going to be the Wild West for a little while. It's going to be rough. It's going to be noisy. There are going to be opportunities for people to take advantage of it, for bad actors to get in there and take advantage of the speed of technology ahead of legislation and the sense of urgency that people have around resolving COVID. And so I think that we will have some very hard lessons learned out of the leaping forward process.
Yeah, I think that's pretty wise. I think both those things I agree with. Okay, well, Karen, thanks for doing this. If people want to learn more or reach out to you or learn about Agrin, how do they find you on the internet, or how do they learn more?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Karen Thomas, and you can email us at info@agrinhealth.com, AGRIN health.com, and I'll be happy to get in touch with folks.
And is there a website, agrinhealth.com as well?
Of course there is. Yeah, and it's very complicated, agrinhealth.com.
And just quickly spell it, AGRIN.
AGRIN. So just quick nugget of fun fact. So agrin is actually a protein that exists in your body, and it has different forms. And the form that exists in your peripheral nervous system actually has a managerial role in overseeing synaptic regeneration. So the protein agrin in your body, one of the things that it does is it reconnects nerves to get information flowing again. And so the Agrin Health, the company, reconnects individuals in the healthcare system to get information flowing again.
That is an excellent name from a neuroscientist turned entrepreneur. And as someone's commented from there, we all need more Agrin in our life. Hey, thanks for doing this, Karen. I really enjoyed it. It's an interesting topic, lots to it, but you helped make it easy to understand. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for having me.